What's after Arcane? That is a very natural question that many of us have been pondering after Season 2 ended. Luckily, Riot have not been keeping the information too tight to their chest, and through numerous interviews and the cinematic, we have a lot of information as to where we're going next. For example, many believe we're heading to Noxus in the next series, but my findings, which I'll delve into in this video, suggest otherwise. I'll also clarify the misunderstood ending of the cinematic and what this symbol truly means. But of course, obligatory mention here that this video will contain a few spoilers. So if you haven't watched Season 2 of Arcane, then go watch it and come back to this video. You better promise me, please, I need the views. In any case, Christian Linker has stated that Riot, quote, have a number of products that kind of are born out of Arcane. And we've seen some of them already, and we'll see more later. Furthermore, Christian states that they're also working on spin-offs around characters from their intellectual property. Many natural guesses arose around characters in Valorant such as Demacia or Noxus. And no, I did not say Valorant. I am not expecting a Jet spin-off. Anyway, from what we've seen and what I'll show you, Riot is expanding the world of Runeterra with their future projects. So let's break down all the information, starting with this interview from Amanda Overton, Arcane's executive story editor. Firstly, Amanda expresses her excitement to look into Ionia for its beautiful Eastern aesthetics, themes and visuals. Amanda later goes on to say that Arcane had a lot of knockers in it, and she has a desire to do something totally new with the next series, like exploring the Freljord and its historical matriarchal society, a very uncommon theme on TV. The Freljord is an extremely rich region, with numerous tribes, a long and vast history, but also, and perhaps most importantly, it's self-contained. Typically, what happens in the Freljord stays in the Freljord, probably encased in ice somewhere. Even the world-ending threats, the Watchers, could not escape the cold and are frozen beneath the howling abyss. That is the tale of three sisters, a complex story revolving around, well, three sisters, their unification of the Freljord, and their ensuing feud. If that feels somewhat reminiscent of Jinx and Vi's relationship in Arcane, there is a closer parallel between Ashe and Sejuani, matriarchs of different tribes that saw each other as sisters initially, but eventually plunged the Freljord into a civil war. Consequently, I believe the Freljord plays right into Amanda's strengths as a storyteller. Amanda has crafted so many compelling and strong moments for female characters in Arcane. One example amongst many is the fight scene between Vi and Civica. This was so beautifully executed. Nonetheless, characters like this permeate the Freljord, and I truly believe Amanda has the capability and dedication to bring them all to life. Conversely, those character archetypes are comparatively rarer in Noxus. In fact, LeBlanc even expressed her disinterest in Mel, the main character in Arcane of that archetype.
Perhaps we should focus on the opportunity that's washed up on our shores.
Unforeseen turns are simply part of any path. Piltover was a lesson. Our next move must be bolder, not safer.
But where will this bold move arrive from? And what does this symbol mean? Generally, the consensus is that this symbol is one of two things. It's either a Watcher or a Darkin. But I'll throw in a bonus and say it could also be a reference to a demon, specifically Atakhan. The key words LeBlanc utters are calamity, imminent, and arrival. In the past, LeBlanc referred to Victor's annihilation of Piltover and Zorn as a calamity.
The calamity is approaching, rivaling even the ancient rune wars.
Comparatively, a literal dog does not exactly scream world-ending calamity. I mean, come on man, I feel like Scooby-Doo poses a larger threat. If you consider the shape itself, especially the eye, it's more reminiscent of a Watcher. In fact, it's almost identical to the Watcher we saw in the Call of Power cinematic. However, the most likely possibility is that this was the precursor to LeBlanc's actions in the animated comic, wherein she unleashes the demon Atakhan from his seal. For context, demons are vastly more powerful than Darkin. The scale of this is also more plausible. It's more significant than getting a new pet, but less drastic than becoming one. So while the super ambitious plotlines surrounding the Watchers or Darkin are very possible, it could be just as simple as Riot wanting to draw a cohesive narrative between the cinematic, the animated comic, and any further releases, such as the upcoming novel centered around Ambessa and her exploits in Noxus. Altogether, Noxus is receiving a lot of exploration in the beginning of 2025, and that's across different mediums. However, I believe that this reduces the likelihood that we'll see a show set in this region. On that note, which regions will feature an Arcane sequel, and which will be explored through other mediums? Well, in his interview with Necrit, Christian Linker said,
"We are investing quite a bit in Noxus, Ionia, Demacia."
But more importantly, he said,
"We start really with character stories." Okay.
Christian Linker has reiterated this several times. Arcane's successor will focus on character stories, be it from Arcane or a new character from the League IP. That is a very clear distinction to make. The cinematics and comics are general world expansions, whereas the shows are honed in on characters. But there's also a chance we may see a new standalone game from Riot within the next 2 years. This was implied in this article by Nicolas Laurent, the former CEO of Riot Games. Here Laurent mentioned Arcane Season 2 and developing new games, amongst a bunch of surprises. This article was written 3 years ago, and its scope covers 5 years, thus we have 2 years left in that timeline. But we've run into the same issue again. Where will this game be set? Well, before they disbanded, Riot Forge made games set in Demacia, Bilgewater, and the Freljord, that being Maidseeker, the Ruined King, and Song of Nunu respectively. That does eliminate a lot of possibilities, but also Riot will likely synchronize the release of this game with the theme of whatever season it is released within. Although, it doesn't look like that'll be until Season 3 of this year, or even 2026.
We're taking you somewhere very different for Season 2.
This year is primarily focused on Runeterra, but we're really excited about the possibilities that alternate universes bring to Seasons.
Yeah, just imagine a world of bees.
Purportedly, Season 2 will take us to an alternative universe, and then Season 3 will bring us back to Runeterra. Regardless, with Act 2 of Season 1 having its own minigame likely following the Noxian theme,
that will debut in Act 2.
The most likely candidates for the game are Ionia, Shurima, and Targon. Although I don't think we'll see Shurima for reasons I'll get to in a moment. But cycling back to Arcane's characters, where are their individual stories heading post-Arcane? Consequently, which character holds the greatest potential to carry Arcane's narrative forward? Frankly, not a single main character in Arcane had a truly complete ending. Mel is heading deeper into Noxus after becoming the Wolf and succeeding Ambessa. Conversely, Dr. Revok is no longer Noxus bound with Ambessa gone. He was last seen with his daughter in Zorn. This has huge implications for the timeline of Arcane, specifically the Noxian invasion of Ionia. Nonetheless, Revok isn't the only one staying behind. Vi and Caitlyn will likely lead post-disaster Zorn and Piltover. Perhaps it's worth noting that the Kiraman family has Ionian heritage, although I don't expect that to be relevant unless they take a sudden trip to Ionia? Fan service beach episode, anyone? And would that make these skins canon? That aside, Jace, Victor and Heimer all disappeared, and we may not see them again in the current time.
Wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
In the back of my mind, I'm thinking there's a small chance that Jace can reappear in the southern parts of Runeterra, specifically Mount Targon, and this was due to Jace's journal.
Ooh!
And interestingly enough, Targonite produces a burst of fluorescent light when exposed to energy. So in this scene of Arcane, the acceleration rune could have been resonating with Targonite. Now shifting to the boy saviour himself, unfortunately, Echo no longer has a purpose in Zorn. The Firelight's initiative was to stop the spread of Shimmer and provide a home for outcasts displaced by Silco. But with Silco gone and Savika on the new council, Echo doesn't really need to stay in Zorn anymore. Thus, Echo will now have ample freedom to take the leap and chase after Jinx.
Sometimes taking a leap forward means leaving a few things behind.
But where did Jinx go? Well, there's a few hints that Jinx is on the way to Bilgewater. Firstly, when Jinx was younger, in the form of Powder, she briefly visited Bilgewater, so she could be going back to rediscover that part of herself. Also, the French LOR Twitter dropped this map during the first season of Arcane. According to this, Jinx thinks that Noxus are the bad guys, Ionia is too calm, and Demacia is full of snobs. However, she drew a heart over Bilgewater. Lastly, from the Arcane documentary, there was initial concept art of Jinx in a Bilgewater outfit, complete with a travel bag for her rocket. So for now, plotlines within Piltover and Zorn have become somewhat stagnant, whereas the threads that left have a lot more potential. Out of all the plotlines, a continuation of Jinx's story would be the most natural and interesting. I know I would be delighted to witness Time Bomb develop even further. And there is nowhere more perfect for a fresh start than Bilgewater, with its clear skies and fresh water? Also, Alex Yee, the co-creator of Arcane, was the original creative behind Nautilus.
I was original creative on like Riven up there and Ari, let's see, Wukong, Nautilus, Lee Sin.
Given everything we've seen recently and in Arcane, Noxus is currently undergoing significant exploration. And while Noxus, Ionia and Demacia have strong narratives on their own, Bilgewater aligns perfectly with Jinx's character journey. As a result, I believe it's much more likely that the sequel to Arcane will be set in Bilgewater. But in terms of spin-offs, what are the biggest possibilities in the world of Runeterra? Initially, I was suspecting Shurima due to the song Ashes in Blood in Arcane, especially since Mako claimed that they invented a whole language. Does that mean Riot have grander plans to reuse this language? Could we see the Void, Ancient Shurima, or even Ikathia? Well, unfortunately, probably not. After looking into it more, I found the LinkedIn profiles of the creators of the Shuriman chant. Seemingly, the creation of the conlang was limited to the chorus, and it appears that the development ended with the release of Arcane Season 2. 15 months does seem like a long time to do this, but that's likely extended due to creating the chorus, teaching it to children, and finally composing it all. So with the Shuriman language remaining incomplete, the odds we see something set in this region is greatly diminished. Nevertheless, I adore the idea that Ashes and Blood was from Janna's perspective, and those are her thoughts on pitiful humans. Expanding on that idea would have been fantastic, but perhaps that's too grand. And those sentiments are reiterated for the next storyline. Generally speaking, the biggest storyline in the world of Runeterra is the first Noxian invasion of Ionia. This event involves by far the most League champions. But again, the scale of this story is far too grand to tell just yet. Just consider the scale of Arcane. Arcane is a story of two sisters and two brothers, contained within Piltover and Zorn. In terms of numbers, Arcane had just 11 out of 170 champions, with Mel Modada being the most recent addition to the roster. The sheer scope of the Noxian invasion of Ionia is extremely vast, with so many interwoven stories. For example, it'd be difficult to remotely touch upon Talia or Riven's story without delving into Yasuo's. I believe the Noxian invasion of Ionia is not much of an individual character's story, rather than being a humongous character crossover moment. The closest analogy I can think of is the Avengers, where the story is driven by a disaster and it's not exactly honed in on one person. So while a spin-off could be set in Ionia, I certainly do not think we'll see the invasion as its focus. And following this assumption, we can significantly narrow down the sheer number of Ionian champions to gauge who this spin-off may contain. By disregarding characters strongly tied to the invasion, the possibilities shrink dramatically, from 22 to just 3. That being Ahri, Ivern, and Lilia. All 3 of these characters are connected by a very specific part of Ionia, which is the Garden of Forgetting. So if we were to go anywhere in Ionia, I believe this garden is the most likely, especially with its vast cultural impact on Ionia. Overall, it seems that Riot are exclusively looking at 2 routes. Either they introduce a new story centered around a character from their IP, or they continue a storyline from Arcane. The former would likely be a spin-off, whilst the latter would likely be a sequel. In my opinion, I believe Bilgewater will host Arcane's next chapter, with Jinx and Echo leading the charge. This aligns with both their character journeys and the broader thematic exploration. As for spin-offs, the most likely contenders for a spin-off are the Freljord and Ionia, particularly given Amanda Overton's clear interest in both regions. And finally, the upcoming game will likely be set in whichever region we're visiting later this year or in 2026. And of course, naturally, a sequel will benefit from the prestige of being the successor to Arcane. Maybe that'll stop people calling Arcane a financial disaster? But it's not a bad thing to reinforce the success of your next show. Regardless of where they take us, I'm so curious to see how Fortiche refine and develop their style further, especially considering the new region will not have such strong architectural influences from Paris. Every region has their own distinct architecture, structure, and stereotypes. A question I want to ask you is, have you ever thought about what Victor's surname is? It's not Victor, just to clarify. And did you ever notice that characters call each other by their first name and not their surname? It's a really subtle cultural difference in this world, but it's so ingrained into these characters that it feels natural. So being able to witness how Fortiche, the writers and the composers bring that to life again is so exciting. But yeah, I think that is it for this video. As a side note, please let me know if you want to see more Arcane content, because I'm not sure if it should continue. I have a wild theory about a beloved character and how they'll bring her back, but I'll save that if you want to see it. For now, what do you think? What are your theories based on the interviews? Which of these paths do you think Arcane is the most likely to take? And which character arcs are you looking forward to? As always, let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe and drop a like. Of course, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.